Start today, Lesson 29. We'd like you to begin this lesson by reading through the first 2 pages of your booklet, pages 337 and 338. When you've done that, we'll listen to some examples of the sort of sounds you can get from an electronic organ using various registers. If this doesn't apply to your own keyboard, either because it's a traditional instrument like the piano, or because it's a completely different model of electronic instrument, we hope you'll bear with this. You can, of course, skip this section if you want. Now let's listen to an electronic organ with the register set at flute 16. The sound is an octave below the note you play on the keyboard. The flute 8 setting gives the same pitch as the note on the keyboard. And now here's the flute 4, an octave higher. And the flute 2, a full 2 octaves above the note you play on the keyboard. Now let's listen to some of the imitations of other instruments. This is the harpsichord register. Next, the strings. And the piano. The special effects include sustain, which prolongs the notes. We're going to play them first with and then without the sustain control, so you can hear the difference. And now the vibrato effect. As we've said in the booklet, there are no precise rules governing how you use the various registers or controls on your electronic instrument. It depends entirely on the nature of the piece you're playing and on your personal taste. The first group of exercises for this lesson, numbers 308 to 311, will give you extra practice playing dotted quavers. You first ran into these dotted quavers in lesson 27, but the rhythms that they set up are important enough to merit some more attention. These exercises are also an essential preparation for our solo piece, Baby Blues, which follows. All the exercises are meant to be played first with the right hand and then with the left. As always, the left hand plays an octave lower, following the fingering written beneath the notes. In exercise 308, the F-sharp key signature produces some unexpected fingering in both hands, designed to avoid playing the F-sharp with the thumb, which would be awkward. So be careful to follow the fingering exactly as written. Exercise 309 alternates the dotted quaver-semiquaver combination with triplets. The rhythm is the main thing to watch, but once again the fingering may spring a few surprises. And don't forget the key signature. Exercise 309. exercise 310, the semiquaver at the end of the third beat of each bar is tied to the crotchet that fills the fourth beat. You've already come across an effect very similar to this in pieces like Disco Handle in Lesson 20 and Serene in Lesson 21. It's as if the fourth beat note is played slightly before the beat, instead of on the beat. You'll hear what it should sound like as we play it for you now. Exercise 310. Finally, exercise 311 in C major. This includes a dotted quaver rest on the second beat of each bar and a tied note at the end of the fourth bar. When you've practiced these 4 exercises thoroughly, you'll be ready to try our solo piece for this lesson, Baby Blues. As long as you can read the accidentals accurately, sharps, flats and natural signs, you shouldn't find this blues too difficult. But do practice exercises 308 to 311 before you begin. Here's Baby Blues. On page 342 of your booklet, you'll find the 7th chords on the first 6 degrees of the C major scale presented as arpeggios. Each chord has to be played first in the root position and then in its 3 inversions. As before, play the arpeggios first with the right hand and then with the left. We start with the C major 7 chord, exercise 312. Now D minor 7, exercise 313. Exercise 314 is the E minor 7 chord. Exercise 315, the F major 7 chord. Exercise 316, the dominant seventh, G7. And finally, the A minor 7 chord, exercise 317. Now it's time to explore the seventh chords in other major scales. As you'll see, they all follow the same pattern. Major seventh chords on the first and fourth degrees of the scale, minor seventh chords on the second, third and sixth degrees, and the dominant seventh on the fifth degree of the scale. Let's look at a sequence of seventh chords in G major, exercise 318. Notice how the position of each chord is selected to give the smoothest possible movement from chord to chord. Right at the start, for instance, G major 7 in its root position is followed by the E minor 7 chord in its third inversion, because this allows no less than 3 notes to remain unchanged, the G, the B and the D. Only the F sharp has to move down 1 tone to E. This principle applies throughout this sequence and all the other sequences that follow. Make sure, by the way, that you don't forget the effect of the key signature in these exercises. Let's listen to exercise 318. Now we'll try the same chord sequence in a more interesting rhythmic pattern. Exercise 318A, just beneath exercise 318 itself, has the root note of each chord in the left hand and the whole chord in the right. The rhythm's quite tricky, so you'll probably have to count to get it right at first. Exercise 318A. Now for a chord sequence in F major, exercise 319. And once more, here's a more rhythmically complex version of the same sequence, exercise 319A. Exercise 320 is in D major. And now exercise 320A with once again quite a tricky rhythm. Exercise 321 is in B flat major. And the same sequence again, exercise 321A. exercise 322 in A major. We haven't given you an exercise 322A. What you should do is choose one of the rhythmic variations from the previous exercises and apply it to this A major sequence. So play this sequence of chords in, for instance, the rhythmic pattern of exercise 320A. Finally, exercise 323 in E flat major. Once again, it's up to you to choose a rhythmic variation for this sequence. In fact, if you want, you can play each of the chord sequences in this section in all the different rhythmic variations we've provided. Smoking is our piece with backing group for this lesson. As you can see, it's mostly based on seventh chords and uses the dotted quaver rhythm. It starts and ends with the right hand playing an octave above the written notes. And there's just one repeated section, 8 bars in the middle of the first page. If you practiced your dotted quaver rhythms properly, you should find that most of this piece isn't too difficult. The fingering in the right hand in the first 2 bars is a little tricky, and you may find the left-hand chord sequence in bars 10 and 11, E minor 7, E flat minor 7 and D minor 7 poses you some problems. But if these or any other bars seem at all difficult, just play them very slowly over and over again until they come naturally and easily. Let's listen to Smoking now. Afterwards, we'll discuss the question of improvisation, which crops up in the middle of the piece. So here is Smoking with keyboard and backing. And now, here it is without the keyboard part. Halfway down the second page of the piece, page 347, you'll have noticed the indication, an example of improvisation, 16 bars. This means that for the next 16 bars, until the third bar of the first line on the following page, the keyboard player you heard on the tape was in fact improvising, making the music up as he went along. The written music here is copied from what the keyboard player played, not the other way round. To be more precise, the keyboard player was making up the right-hand part, inventing little melodic phrases, fragments of tunes, to fit in with a fixed chord sequence represented by the root note of each chord played by the left hand. In fact, the chord sequence is very simple. C major, A minor, D minor 7 and G7. Just 4 chords repeated again and again. We would suggest that when you start to play Smoking, you follow the music right through, playing the notes exactly as they're written from beginning to end. It will take some time to do this successfully. But eventually, you might like to improvise some music for yourself through the 16 bars of the fixed 4-chord sequence. How should you set about it? Well, begin by making absolutely sure that you can play the 4 notes in the left hand, C, A, D and G, virtually in your sleep, so that you can keep on playing them almost endlessly without even having to think about it. Then you can start trying out your own notes and rhythms over the top, although you shouldn't stray too far from the basic rhythm and feel of the piece itself. There's no better method here than trial and error, listening to your own playing and deciding if you like what you hear. When you do begin to produce something that doesn't sound too bad, try to remember it, so that you don't have to start from scratch again the next time you play. Don't be overambitious. Improvisations often sound best with very few notes, a lot of repetition, and plenty of silences. You don't have to play long strings of notes very fast. And you needn't strain to make what you play sound very different from the example we've given you. In fact, trying to play the improvisation on the tape by memory might be a good way to get into it. When you get more confident, you might try playing the chords in the left hand instead of just the root notes. It's entirely up to you how adventurous you want to be. We'll be giving more systematic advice on improvisation later in the course, and a lot more practice too. But it's just as well to give it a go now and see how you get on. If you find it doesn't come naturally, there's no harm done. With more practice later, you'll eventually get it right.